Do you ever find that when you're building in The Sims 4 or you're watching a speed build video on YouTube, sometimes it seems that everything just comes together so perfectly with hardly any effort, and other times it's a real struggle? It just feels like no matter what you do, you just can't seem to get it right. Well, I have to be honest and say that this build was definitely one of the latter. So be warned, she is going to be an ugly duckling for a little while here. However, I am so glad I persevered because eventually she does transform into a beautiful swan, and I was really happy with how it turned out. So today we're building in the world of Inner Screen, which comes with the new Enchanted by Nature pack. Now what I'm trying to do here goes against all my instincts as a builder in The Sims 4. Just naturally, I always gravitate towards symmetry and simple lines. But today I'm throwing caution to the wind and doing something completely different, and I have to say, it only took minutes, maybe even seconds, for me to regret that decision. When you try and incorporate all these interesting angles into a build, it can just make things a little bit complicated. So why do this, I hear you ask? That is a good question. I really wanted the house to feel like it was part of the surroundings, so I looked in debug for this particular tree here that's off to the side of the lot, and I did find it. I placed it down on the lot, and my idea is that we were going to use it to create almost like a little tree house on the second floor. If you want to try and do this too, what I find is the easiest way is to place down your lower floor, copy and paste that and place another floor on top of it, delete the ground floor, and then position the tree within the confines of that second floor. You can then use fences if you like to carve out a little hole for the tree to poke through. I hope that makes sense. If any of that is unclear, please leave me a comment below and I'll try and explain better in the comments. Today I am trying to channel Radagast the Brown energy. If you're not a Lord of the Rings nerd like me and you're thinking who or what on earth is Radagast the Brown, no worries. All you really need to know for the sake of this build is that Radagast is one of the wizards from Tolkien's Middle-earth stories. He's basically this wonderful nature-loving soul who lives deep in the woods and talks to the animals and is more concerned with nature than with epic battles or the politics of the rest of Middle-earth. He's got this wonderful affinity with animals, particularly birds. One really hilarious thing about the movies is that little birds actually live under his hat, and they've built a little bird's nest under there. You'll see I tip my hat to Radagast's love for birds a few times throughout this build. I put this little bird behind us today as a homage to the character. It's probably fair to say he's slightly chaotic and a little bit unhinged, love that, which is why his house has to be all these weird, interesting angles and shapes to match the personality of the sim who I think would live here. So when I say that this cottage is going to have Radagast energy, what I mean is that it's going to be the ultimate foresty hideaway. Slightly messy, it's probably fair to say, but nonetheless still very cozy and homey. It's definitely welcoming for all creatures great and small who might stumble across it in the Sims world, including our unfortunate Sims friends who may have been struck by an ailment. In the new Enchanted by Nature pack, ailments are something that our Sims can actually catch. Some of these are really funny. Burning passion. Sims get a flirty moodlet and may set objects on fire. Greeny meanie. Sims gain an affinity for plants but have random angry outbursts. Sonic sinuses. Sims break things when they sneeze but get a bonus to the handiness skill. Some of these are so random. Now it's around this time, I'll be honest, I was beginning to really think, oh my goodness, what have I done? Nothing I tried looked quite right. I could have deleted a lot of this struggle from the video, but I decided to keep it because, little personal story, this is now my third speed build that I've posted on this channel, Sims Builds and Chill, and I've known for ages that I've wanted to create speed build videos on YouTube, but I was always a little nervous to start because when I watched other creators on YouTube, they all just seemed so good. And I mean that in the most complimentary way. There's so many wonderful Sims builders out there on YouTube, but I just felt, if I'm being really honest with myself and with you, I just felt a little bit intimidated. Like my builds could never be that good and my videos could never be so smooth. So I felt like it was really important to acknowledge that struggle for myself, but also in case anyone's watching this who's thinking, I really want to start a speed build channel or a Sims channel or any kind of YouTube channel channel, but maybe you just don't feel like you're quite good enough. I thought it was really important to just show that it is difficult, but if you just dive in and keep going, you can actually do a lot better than you thought you might be able to. So that's why this part of the video is like this. The struggle was real. If you have the new Enchanted by Nature pack installed, Sims can quickly cure ailments by learning the Apothecary skill at the Apothecary table. Depending on your Sim's skill level, some of these cures may work beautifully, while others may have, let's say, less than desirable effects. If you so desire, you can stock your shelves with these cures and decorate your apothecary. Honestly, I don't think I've ever said the word apothecary so much until this pack came out. I thought this would be so perfect for the Sim who lives in this house. We can start to imagine the Sim who lives here as the forest apothecary, where our Sims go to get cures for all these strange and magical ailments. Now, going hand in hand with this is the new naturopathy career. I'm very sorry if I am saying that wrong. This is another word that I don't tend to say very much. This is one of those semi-active careers. If we're working from home, Sims with ailments will actually turn up at our little cottage, and we have the opportunity to diagnose them like a full-on magical forest healer. So this is a quick overview of our Sim, the cottage, and their life. I created a little porch, and I imagined this almost like a waiting area when our Sims come with ailments and we're cooking up a cure for them. One thing that I think really helped me whilst I was building this was, you'll see with that roof that we've now got overhanging the house and kind of being supported by a column. I held down Shift C when I was clicking on the roof, and if you hold down Shift C on your keyboard, you actually have a lot more control over the roof. So we have one side hanging down more than the other. I wanted to give the impression that the cottage was almost leaning a little bit. Like I say, this went against absolutely all of my instincts to make things symmetrical. And whilst that was challenging, I'm really, really glad I pushed myself, because you can do so much more than you think that you can when you just step outside your comfort zone. I was toying with the idea that we might be able to get a little second floor at one point. I kind of like the idea of maybe a lofted bedroom, but unfortunately, with the way I did the roofs, it just wasn't possible. There just wasn't enough space. And I think weighing everything up, the higgledy-piggledy shape of the roof is probably more important than the lofted bedroom, so reluctantly I let that idea go, and we have a one-story bungalow-style cottage here. I think round about now is where it starts making sense to me. I mean, as much sense as a cottage like this can possibly make. Honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges with something like this is making it look higgledy-piggledy and random and fun, but also kind of intentional. Like, I didn't want it to look like I just put things everywhere with no intentionality or vision for how it was going to look. Because with something like this, there's always just the chance that it could look absolutely terrible. And that was a big fear of mine along the way. And you know what? Once I let go of the feeling that I needed to get it right, I had so much fun with this build. Just to see what's possible. What could I do that maybe I haven't done before? How far can I push the weirdness of this cottage? It was really a great experiment, and I would love to create more things like this in the future. So if you like this and you're interested in seeing more weird and wonderful builds, I would absolutely love it if you hit subscribe and came back to join me again. And as a thank you for subscribing, here's a picture of a cat wearing a shower cap. And then I just mimicked the way we have that column supporting the larger roof piece on the smaller roof piece. I really wanted it to feel like this house was kind of being held up. I have a feeling that our Sim probably built this home himself many years ago, and over time it's kind of just settled into its environment. This is the second full build I've done since the Enchanted by Nature pack came out, and I'd be really curious to hear what you think about it. Have you bought this expansion pack? Are you intending to buy it? Do you like it? Is it everything that you were expecting? Is there anything you think should be in there that we didn't get? You'll see at this point I did also toy with the idea of having a rounded porch, and honestly this was one kooky Sims feature too far. I don't know what I was thinking. The house is crazy enough without it, so I do delete that and I go back to the diagonals. And I think that just worked a bit better and honestly saved my sanity as well. I was trying to think of a fun name for this cottage, and one idea I had was Rosgobel, because that's the name of the area where Radagast lives in Middle Earth, and I thought that was a lovely nod to the inspiration and the kind of lore behind this build. But I'd love to know if you you have any ideas as well? If you do, please drop them in the comment section below. I'd love to read them because we don't actually have wizards exactly in The Sims 4. We have spellcasters and now we have fairies and we have vampires as well and a few other occults. So it doesn't actually have to be Radagast strictly related. It could be anything that you can think of that would suit this little cottage. Another cool feature of the Enchanted by Nature expansion pack is that now Sims can kind of really and truly live off the land. Like, they don't really need a house anymore. They can bathe in a lake and they can sleep on the floor and summon a bush out of nowhere to pee if they really need to. And this is actually a new skill in the Enchanted by Nature expansion pack. So at first, Sims might experience a little bit of discomfort when doing these things, but eventually they get really good at it and it doesn't bother them anymore. And this new skill is really important for the naturopathy career. So whilst I did give this sim a conventional bathtub and a bed and a toilet and those kind of quote unquote normal things that you would expect in a normal house, I also like the idea that he spends a lot of time outside as well, building his skill and just enjoying being at one with nature and the animals. One little thing I did that I really liked is that I used one of these roof details as a kind of nod to the idea that I wanted to create a second floor but couldn't really. And I put it on a slightly jaunty angle. So it's not a diagonal, it's not straight on, it's slightly jaunty. And I really like that because it just looked a bit unexpected, unpredictable, and it's something that we couldn't do with walls. If you hold down the Alt key when you're placing items, you can move them more freely. So that's how I achieved this weird angle with this roof piece, this little dormer window. In the end, for the color scheme of this house, I went for a lot of dark wood tones, kind of matching that dark tree color that we have there. I thought that would make a lot of sense if we're imagining that this sim built the house themselves, that they use just what's naturally around. I like the wood tones to all be exactly the same when I'm building, but here I kind of, again, I went against my natural instinct and I tried not to worry too much if things were a little bit off, a little bit different, because I think that's just a really lovely idea. The idea that he collected bits and pieces throughout his time here. He added bits to the house as he went along over time. Not everything had to be exactly planned. It just kind of grew and developed the longer this sim lived here. That being said, I do imagine that they have been here for quite some time. So I wanted it to look like the house was almost given back to nature, if that makes sense. So I put some of these lovely flowers hanging off the side of the house to make it feel completely and utterly overgrown. It's almost like, you know, when you see photographs of abandoned cities and people haven't lived there for a long time and it's like nature is almost claiming it back. That's what I was trying to accomplish here. I had a lot of fun here and I gave myself permission to take this as far as I dare. I was not holding back, you guys. I wanted to push this to the limits because I think if there's ever a time when we can do something like this and really go for it, it's with the kooky Apothecary cottage. And you'll see I took it even further by using the new base game update that allows us to place certain plants on the roof. Now the plants didn't slot absolutely everywhere because I'd gone for some weird and wonderful shapes, but I think that's absolutely fine that they come out in fits and starts. It just adds this idea that nothing's planned, everything's completely random. Now you may have noticed I have not looked inside this cottage for quite some time, and I will admit that is because I was a little scared. I knew when I went inside it was going to be a really strange shape and there was going to be a lot of diagonal walls, and I was going to have to figure out a floor plan that made sense without making sense, if that makes sense. But you know what? Once I started, this was one of my favorite parts of the whole build. I loved figuring out where things went. That was so much fun for me. I really relished that challenge. So once I've cleared away the inner walls and I'm left with a shell, I just go in and I start placing down some random furniture just to see how we can do it. I started with the kitchen because I knew that this was probably going to be the most important bit to get right. And I say that because when you place the kitchen counters on a diagonal wall in The Sims 4, they don't quite fit right. They only really fit together, slot together as you would expect when you have them on the kind of right angle angles, if that makes sense, when you have them on the conventional square, not a diagonal. So I thought, well, I'll get the kitchen right and then I'll build everything else around it. So I have the kitchen going along here, almost like the heart of the house, the center of the house, as a kitchen should be. And then I was able to wiggle a little corner unit onto the end, onto that diagonal part, in a way that kind of made sense to me. Once I had the kitchen, I was able to go in and place down some of those windows that I love so much. I initially got the idea for this build when I saw the new windows, doors, and arches that come with Enchanted by Nature. I just love how organic and wibbly wobbly and unconventional they are. It felt like it was giving us permission to throw out the rulebook. Sticking with the Lord of the Rings theme, I've seen a lot of people creating little cozy hobbit holes with these doors and windows, and I think that is so perfect as well, especially with the new green roofs that we have with the Enchanted by Nature pack. This right here is the new Apothecary table, which is very important for building the Apothecary skill, and the Apothecary cabinet where you can store your potions and cures once you've made them. I really love that they matched the new counters that we got in Enchanted by Nature. The fact that they match so well just really helped me create an inconsistent consistency about this whole room. The other thing I knew for sure I really needed in this house was a cozy fireplace. Somewhere where the sim can curl up with a book and a cup of tea on a cold day. The only place that really made sense to me to have it was on this diagonal wall. It's the only area that was big enough, not just for the fireplace, but also a little rocking chair in front of it. And I think this turned into such a cozy nook. If this was my house, I would spend so much time sitting in this rocking chair in front of this beautiful fireplace. Another struggle I have, as if there could be any more, was with this tree. At some point, and I'll point out to you when I notice it, it raises up, so it's not actually on the floor anymore. It's almost floating and hovering. And I think that's because of the foundation with this house. I think that's what caused this problem. So in a little bit, I have a complete nightmare trying to get the tree back on the ground, but the house up on the foundations. I'm so glad I noticed it when I did, because if I hadn't noticed it till the end, I would have been absolutely devastated. Fortunately, I was able to find a workaround. It's so funny. I must have watched The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies 100 times each, and not once have I ever thought, I wonder what Radagast's toilet is like. So when it came to decorating this little bathroom, I must admit I was having a bit of a nightmare trying to picture what it would be like. I essentially tried to go for similar wood tones that we have in the rest of this house just to make it, again, consistently inconsistent. I love the idea that he just knocked together this bathtub one day. And honestly, I think it came out really well. It definitely has Radagast the Brown energy. Into the bedroom, and I just tried to make it look as cluttered but cozy as I possibly could. So I put down a few furniture pieces for him. I didn't think he probably needed very much. I don't imagine he has too many clothes in his wardrobe. So I thought this little cupboard would be absolutely perfect for him. I also put down some of these nice suitcase looking things for extra storage. I threw down a few of the shabby looking rugs that we have just to soften it up a bit. And then again, I just put down a few different wood types, wood textures, just to, again, add to this idea that he's added to the house a little bit at a time. I also broke it up with some stone as well. How good do these floor tiles from Werewolves suit this house? I love that they're a little bit random and some of them are broken, but somehow they still look homey and cozy. I really tried to make myself have the front door slightly off center, but my need for symmetry just would not allow me to go that far. I couldn't get it to look like it wasn't just wrong, like I hadn't just done it wrong. I think that's what's really hard about a build like this, to make it look intentional, not just like a series of terrible mistakes. I really love this new chimney piece we have here. I think all these different angles are just so good for mirroring what we have going on in the rest of the house. Tell me honestly, do you think you could live somewhere like this? Would you love it? Would you hate it? Do you see it as a peaceful little hideaway away from the rest of the world? Or would living here be more of a punishment? I'd love to know your thoughts. I was actually really surprised with how much we were able to fit in this tiny little living space. I do play test this after the build, and I did have to change just a couple of things, tweak a couple of things, just because I wanted to make sure that everything in this build was functional if you did want to play here. But essentially, this is what we end up with, and honestly, we were able to cram so much in. I tried to think when building this house what skills would be important for the new naturopathy career. So we've got the apothecary table to build the apothecary skill. And then depending on which career branch your sim decides to go with, they either need the fitness skill, I believe, or they need an area out the back in this kind of sunny area, because I thought that would be suitable to have the Sims plants in the sun. I don't think it actually makes any difference in The Sims 4, but these are the kind of things I like to think about when I'm building. I thought, yeah, the plants they're gonna like being in the sun. So we have this little area out the back for growing the gardening skill. And then fitness was a real struggle. I could not think about how to incorporate fitness on this lot. It would just seem weird to have some gym equipment, don't you think? So if you want to play on this lot and you want to build your fitness skill, I thought, well, this will be a great opportunity to go out into the community, maybe go to a gym or something like that. The other thing that I thought was a little odd is your Sims have to use a computer to study nature. I also didn't like the idea of having a computer here. That just felt not right for what we were trying to do. So again, a nice opportunity to go to a community lot, maybe a library or something like that. Find a computer, make some friends, some friends other than the animals. Now, I did have a bit of a technical issue here. I lost a piece of footage. So if you're wondering why we've suddenly jumped a little bit, that's why. But never fear, the only thing that we missed was just me going through and picking out lots of cute and interesting little pieces of clutter. This sim, he is not a tidy person, and I say that with all the love in the world. Chaotic surroundings do not bother him in the slightest. So I really wanted to lean into that and just cover these surfaces with really interesting things that he's picked up over the years and hung on to. He's probably a bit of a hoarder, if we're honest. So that is what I'm doing now. I'm just placing things down on all the different shelves, placing things down on the floor, placing things down on other things, just to really make sure we get the point across here. I really like going through and looking at all of the clutter that we have now. There's always something interesting that I've either missed or I've forgotten about. And I did dive into the debug menu here as well, just to give more options and more variety and more interest. We've got some necessities, we've got some plates and some lighting, some jars that could store food. He does have a little wine barrel and a wine rack on top of the fridge. And the other thing is, I do see the sim as a bit of a bookworm. I imagine their perfect evening is they grab a book, they grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine, they go and hang out in their little treehouse amongst the birds and the other animals, and they just hang out in the peace and quiet after a satisfying day of curing everyone's sicknesses. I think this sim has a really pure heart, a good heart. That's why I wanted to make sure that this cottage, whilst eccentric, it wasn't scary, it wasn't sinister in any way. It did look welcoming to all kinds of animals, great and small. On that bookshelf at the back there, I did put some exotic animals. I was kind of in two minds, because whilst he likes animals, I didn't know how he would feel about keeping them caged. But I thought I'd imagine it almost like a sanctuary, like maybe these animals themselves are sick and he's just keeping them there whilst he cures them and makes them better, and then when they're better he'll release them back into the wild. I just thought that was such a lovely thought. And the other thing I did that I was really quite proud of is, you'll see next to the fireplace, I went into the debug menu and I found some of those feathers that you can collect if you have the cats and dogs expansion pack, and I just thought this was a really cute nod to the fact that he has this affinity with birds. I imagine when he's out and about in nature, if he sees a bird feather that he thinks is particularly beautiful, he might keep it and frame it. Or I've just had this thought actually just as I'm talking to you, but maybe these are feathers of some of his very special bird friends that have passed on. Oh my god, that just got me quite emotional. But maybe these are memories almost of some of the birds that he was particularly close to. I'm sorry if that was a bit sad. I just had that idea and I just thought it was quite touching. What I'm doing now is I'm just trying to make his bedroom seem in keeping with the rest of the house. One thing I did, which I thought personally was really funny, is I put down one of those new house plants that we have in the Enchanted by Nature pack. These house plants are a little bit different from the other house plants that we have for The Sims 4 in the sense that you need to care for them or they'll die. And I thought maybe it would be hilarious if he saw this plant almost like a roommate. So he talks to it, he hangs out with it, just like you would if you had another sim living here, but it's a plant. I don't know if you can see, but because I sized down those little trunks, those suitcase-like things, I completely forgot that that meant that the objects that I was placing on top of there would naturally want to slot a little higher. Fortunately, I caught it and I was able to lower them down so they're sitting nicely. But for a moment there, they were actually floating just above the trunks. It's these little things as you're going through that you have to be so aware of, or you might not catch them. I did play around with the idea that maybe this could also be an eco house. If you have the eco living expansion pack, you can build a house that is completely off the grid. And I thought, yeah, this sim they probably would be off the grid. That seems like a lifestyle that would suit them quite well. But number one, I feel like we have enough challenges with this build without giving ourselves more. And number two, I don't know if they'd have all that technology, like the wind turbines and the solar powers. Whilst I think this sim would love the idea of that, I see this as a lot more rustic and less, not really futuristic exactly, but less 2025. I found it really hard to think about what kind of clutter would this sim have in their bathroom. The rest of the house was really easy to clutter up with just anything and everything that looked suitable, but I don't think he'd really have a lot of soaps and fragrances and those things that you might expect in the typical bathroom. So again, I just tried to lean into the potential randomness of this and just place down a few things that I thought would be interesting. Like he's got a teapot there because he loves having a cup of tea while he's in the bath, and then a few little bottles that we could pretend contain cures that he's concocted on his apothecary table. So maybe some of them you use in the bath and they improve your skin or they improve your hair. He's got a few books, of course, because maybe he likes reading books in the bath. I know I certainly do. And now we're coming on to the moment I was telling you about, where I realized that we have a floating tree. Now, what I had envisioned for this backyard is definitely a ladder. That was in the forefront of my head. But I thought maybe it would be cool if we could use the foundation and platforms to create a few steps, custom steps, and then the ladder, so it wasn't as expected. It was a little bit, almost like the platforms and the steps that we built, they were there already, and he's just used what was there naturally in the land and placed a ladder on top of it to create his means to get up to that second floor. But the trouble is, when I started messing around too much with foundations and platforms, that just made the whole tree thing so much worse. And in the end, I go for a conventional staircase. We'll come back to that a bit later. Now, at this point, when I was building, my husband came into the room and he said, "Oh, this looks great. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we pretended that maybe this apothecary cottage was hidden in the woods, and in order to find it you almost need to already know it's there, like you need to have a recommendation or maybe something like that." I quite like the idea that maybe he was unlicensed, like he shouldn't really be doing this, so he didn't actually want too many people to know what was going on inside this cottage. But the reason I didn't go with that idea was because I was so happy in the end with how the front of this little cottage looks, and I couldn't bring myself to cover it up with bushes. So one idea I had for a brief moment is maybe he's got a little hut out the front, which is what this little building is here that I created to the left. And maybe that's kind of like the front room. So you go in there and everything's kind of normal. There's nothing suspicious or untoward going on. Maybe that's where he could have his computer and some more normal, everyday kind of items. And then we could have one of those bookshelves, the little secret door bookshelves, the bookshelves that look like a hidden door leading to the little path. And from there, that's the only way you can get into the cottage. But I abandoned it because it was almost a little bit big. We didn't have enough space and it didn't quite look right. And after spending so long getting this little cottage to quote unquote look right in the wrongest kind of ways, I didn't really want to do anything that compromised that. So we didn't go with that in the end. But I did create a little pathway with these stepping stones off to the side. So it wasn't completely clear how you get into the cottage, just as a little nod to this idea. Now, where the landscaping really came together for me was when I found this tall grass in debug, and I thought, oh, of course, he's not going to mow his lawn. Not only because mowing the lawn is not a priority to this sim, but also I imagine that he just loves the little ecosystem that's going on in there, all the bug life and all the animals that have their habitat in there. So he just lets it grow. So I start off and this is quite tame, and then it does escalate and it ends up all around the left-hand side of the lot. And I really liked it. I thought it looked so natural and overgrown. So what I'm trying to do here is just place down some plants that I can see in the rest of the world, just to kind of tie it in, because I am very aware that this house is a lot more disheveled than the world around it. So I wanted to do what I could to try and blend it in. This little fenced in area off to the left, this is what's going to be our garden area to help him build the apothecary skill and progress in the naturopathy career. So we're going to have a little garden down there, and then we've created the higgledy-piggledy staircase going up to that treehouse area. It's all coming together, guys. I was so excited at this point when I could see it all coming together. I created this little archway that your Sims can walk through just to really sell the idea that you're coming into somewhere quite different right now. And then I just top it all off with a little lake. I just feel like he would bathe in this lake almost more often than he would bathe in his bathtub. Now, one conflict I had. Do you think this Sim is a vegan? I did put down a little fishing sign by the lake because I thought it was such a lovely spot, but with this Sim, would he be a friend to fish in the same way that he's a friend to the birds? Let me know what you think. If you don't like the idea that he fishes in that lake, if it doesn't tie into the rest of the story that we're trying to tell here, you can just delete it, no worries. This idea that really made me chuckle was that he keeps chickens, because as we mentioned, he does love birds. So I gave him a little chicken coop, and I imagine that very often he might sleep out there with the chickens just because he has this wonderful affinity with nature and these birds. And then his little garden area, I imagine that he reluctantly cleared an area because he needed to grow these specific plants and forage for these specific items that he would need. So this little fenced in area has a slightly different vibe, but I think within the larger storyline it still makes sense. Now in The Hobbit, as we mentioned, Radagast Cottage is literally part of a tree, or it looks like it's carved from a tree. So I didn't really know exactly how to do that, but I did like the idea that maybe he built the house with these rocks that we can imagine were already there as the foundation. So the foundations of the house are these rocks that were already part of the land. So I tried to blend the house into the rest of the lot using these rocks. And honestly, I actually really love how it looked. I was really pleased with this. It just blurred the lines of where the house ends and nature begins. I also imagine his little stepping stone path was made from these same rocks. The color and the style of them just go together so well. If you're curious about how you can create something like this, you hold down Control, Shift and C, and then you type in bb.moveobjects space on into the little bar that comes up. And from there, if you press the 9 and the 0 key, you can lift objects up or you can lower them down. So you can see that's what I'm doing here. That's how I'm stacking the rocks in this higgledy-piggledy fashion, one on top of the other, and creating my own landscape with the rocks. I struggled with what activities he could do in this little treehouse area. In the end, what I decided on was a woodworking table, because although that's not strictly needed for the naturopathy career, I do think it might be a hobby, like just something he does for fun, because as we were discussing, I think he built the vast majority of this house himself just using the wood and what's naturally around. So I put down a woodworking table, and then I also put down a telescope as a nod to the idea that maybe he's doing something a little bit, shifty under the counter here. So he's got the telescope so he can look out just to make sure that no one official is coming to close him down. In the Hobbit movies, Radagast gets round by a sled that's pulled by rabbits, and obviously we can't do that in The Sims, but what I thought would be the next closest thing would be a little bicycle. I love the idea of this eccentric character cycling around town with a basket full of miscellaneous potions. If you think you might want to play on this lot, I'll put it on the gallery. I'll just call it Apothecary's Cottage, or you can just search for Sims Build Chill to see all of my creations. It turned out he got a lovely big porch area he can sit out on. I put a little bench down there so he can hang out there as well. I really don't like there to be any empty or unused space on a lot like this. So as a final touch, I put down a little fire pit out the front and a few little seats as another little hangout zone for your Sim. And now we'll just jump back into the game and I'll give you a little tour of everything so you can see everything clearly, because I know it can be kind of difficult with the speed builds when everything's moving around so quickly. Here you can see what it looks like from the outside. You enter through this little archway on the cobbled stones. You have the beautiful lake off to the left. You have the cottage straight ahead. As we go around, we have that lovely fire pit area we talked about, the more manicured area where he can forage, he can grow plants, anything that he might need. And then up top, he's got his little hobby. He's got his woodworking table. I'm honestly really happy with how this treehouse area came out. It looks even better than I could have anticipated. Moving on to the inside, he's got his living, dining, kitchen, work area all in one, all kind of piled together. I thought, well, that doesn't just work well for the floor plan, but it also works well for this Sim and how his mind works. And then over to the back, he's got his cute little cluttered bedroom. He's got his houseplant roommate, and he's got his barely used bathtub. I'm really happy that you joined me today for this build. If you enjoy this kind of whimsical, magical build and and you'd like to see more, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to make it easy for you to come back again in the future. And if you'd like to connect with me on social media, you can find me on Instagram and on X at SimsBuildChill.